Rob here at eTrailer.com, and today you're going to be taking a look at the Roadmaster Hy-Power Diode wiring kit on our 2019 GMC Canyon. Now our diode kit is going to allow us to take the signals from our motorhome's taillights, transfer them into our Canyon so whenever we're towing it, everybody knows whether we're changing lanes, stopping, and can see all the signals at the back. Keep in mind that our wiring is only going to be one component of a full flat tow setup. You will need a base plate, and that's going to mount directly onto the frame of your Canyon so we have a solid connecting point for our tow bar. Now our tow bar is going to be the second item, and that's going to connect to the base plate so that we can hook it up to the motorhome as well. Then we'll have our safety cables. There's going to be a secondary safety device in case anything were to happen to the tow bar and become disconnected. This is going to prevent our Canyon from continuing down the road. We'll have a braking system, and that's going to apply the brakes to the Canyon itself, so we don't have to rely on the motorhome to slow it down since we're adding so much weight. And finally, one last item I would highly recommend is the Roadmaster Automatic Battery Disconnect. Because in order to flat tow our Canyon, we do have to disconnect the battery to put it in tow mode, and the automatic battery disconnect is just going to make it a lot easier and a lot more convenient without having to open the hood and get tools out. Our diodes are going to serve two major functions. They're going to take the signal from our motorhome as well as the signal from our truck and allow them to go into one single housing. That way we don't have to worry about putting another bulb inside the housing, running magnetic lights, worrying about scratching the side of our truck from the wire, or any of that. The second thing our diodes are going to do is it's going to protect our Canyon. If there is a problem on the motorhome side where something started shorting or we have electrical backfeeding, it's going to protect our harness and make sure that there's no damage to it. As far as the installation goes, it is going to be a permanent install, which means after we have it in, we're not going to have to worry about it anymore. There's nothing else to set up. But I know some of you may feel a little bit nervous, maybe a little bit overwhelmed about cutting into your taillight wiring, but rest assured it is definitely something you can do at home. In fact, let's go ahead and do it together. To begin our installation, we want to start at the front of our Canyon, and we want to find where we're going to be mounting our electrical connector. Now we already have two posts because of our base plate sticking out of the front, so we know that we want to have our wiring really close to that. So I started here, and then I routed my wire all the way to the very back, and we'll show you how we got it there. So here's where our wire came from the front. We went underneath this skid plate panel. You can see our wire running back. We went over the steering column, went around the front differential. You do want to make sure you secure this pretty well right around the subframe area in here. We have our exhaust over here, so you want to keep it as far away as you can and far away from the drive shaft so it doesn't get stuck in there. Then we just started running it along the frame rail, securing it in place with some zip ties, going over all of our fuel lines, going over top of the frame rail there. And once we got to our fuel tank, I just ran it along the outside of the fuel tank. Had to go all the way to the top of the frame rail here. You can see it coming back out. Ran it along, and it stopped here where I have my excess wire. Now we need to move up top, and we're going to be taking out our taillight assemblies. So if we open up our tailgate, we want to look on the inside ledge here. We're going to have two fasteners that are holding each taillight in place. We're going to grab a T15 Torx bit and we'll pull those two screws out. Once you have both screws out, you're going to pull straight back on the taillight assembly because there are some alignment pins and we don't want too much side-to-side movement. Once you have them out, you can see those plastic pins can be a little tight. But we need to disconnect the wiring. So what we can do is we can just come to this metal clip. I'm just going to slide it off. And then we're just going to twist each one of these lights out. Turn it counterclockwise a quarter turn. Then we'll pull the bulb out. And we can set the taillight assembly aside. We're going to take out the other side as well. Now you want to turn your taillights off, and I have an assistant holding the brake pedal for me so we can isolate the brake signal. Again, we're just going to go through and check each one of these wires to see which one's which. We already know that our orange wire is the taillight wire. And the gray wire is going to control our brake circuit. Now again, we want to check the other side and test those wires as well. Now over on the passenger side, we went ahead and tested those wires as well, and they're actually the exact same color and function, and they're in the same spot of the loom, so they're really easy to find and identify. Now that we have all the functions identified on the wires, we're going to need to take our 4-pole wire and we're going to cut the end off because we're not going to be using this at the back here. You just cut it real close to the connector. Cut each one of the wires. And now we want to pull the wires apart so that we can have each one separate all the way to the last anchor point that we put or have our wire secure with the zip tie underneath. We just want to go and separate all the wires all the way up. Once you have all your wires separated, we're going to start with the yellow wire and the brown wire since we're on the driver's side. And we need to get these up into the taillight housing area. But if you look in there, you can actually see the ground pretty close. So I'm just going to feed my wire up, get it high enough to where I can grab it. And you want to make sure you pull all the excess up and we don't have a wad of it hanging out underneath our truck. Now I always like to take a zip tie and secure it up here, that way in case it does get a little bit of slack, it doesn't fall back down through and won't cause any problems. So we're going to start out with our orange wire, which if you remember, that's going to be our taillight circuit. So we're going to come downstream a little bit, we're going to cut that wire in half, and then we're going to want to strip back both ends. We'll grab one of the diodes out of our kit that has all blue connectors on it. We'll take one of the connectors off, doesn't matter which one. We'll slide it over the end of our wire and then just crimp it in place. Grab another one and do the same thing for the other end of the bare wire. And we'll take our diode, and we'll take the last connector off. And if we look closely at our diode, we're going to have an in and an outside. The inside should have 2 terminals and the outside should have 1 terminal. The side that going towards the out is going to go closest to the light bulbs going out towards the tail light. So we can plug that in. Then we'll take the other wire and that's going to get connected to the in terminal on the other side of our diode. And with our wires hooked up like this, this is going to allow our factory taillights to work whether we're flat towing or not, because the wire is going to come in and go straight out to the diode. So we're going to do the same thing and hook up our gray wire, that's going to be our brake and turn signal wire, the exact same way, with 2 blue connectors and the diode in the middle. With both of our diodes hooked up now to the factory wires, we can start hooking our harness into it. We'll start with our yellow wire, which is going to hook into the diode that's hooked up to our gray wire. Just want to estimate about how much wire you need to get to the diode. It's not a bad idea to give yourself a little bit of slack. We'll cut the excess off. We'll trim back the end of it. And we're going to grab a blue connector and crimp it in place. We'll hook our yellow wire into the other inside of the terminal on our diode. That way whenever we're driving, our factory lights will work because the harness is going to be going in and then going out to the bulb. But also whenever we're flat towing, our harness is going to come in, send the signal, and then go out to the taillight bulb itself. Now when we hook up our taillight one, it is going to be a little bit different. So we'll grab our brown wire. Again, estimate about how much wire we're going to need, trim the excess, except this time we want to hold on to the excess, and we're going to strip back the end of the wire coming from the bottom as well as the end of the excess wire. And once you have both ends stripped, you want to combine the 2 wires together. And since these are going to be a little bit thicker, since there's 2 of them together, we want to make sure we grab the yellow connector out of our diode kit. And this is just going to be a different size, so it's easier to fit both wires into that connector. We're going to put both of them in and crimp it in place. And we'll hook it directly into the other inside of our taillight diode. Now the excess wire here, we're going to run this back down to the bottom underneath our truck so we can meet up with the green wire and route it over to the passenger side. The brown wire is going to be for our taillight signal, and the green wire is going to be for our right turn signal and right brake signal. So we just need to run it over and hook it up exactly the same way as we did over here. So I ran both my green and brown wire towards the center, and I ran it all the way to the very back of my truck, ran it all the way over to the passenger side, and then again using that same method of just pushing it up and grabbing the wire, I have it coming out the taillight assembly area. Now on the passenger side, our diode's hooked up exactly the same way. Our gray wire, we have it connecting going from the in to the out, with our green wire on the other end of the diode. Then we have our orange wire from the factory wiring going from the in to the out, and we have our brown wire going to the other end of that diode. If we flip our diodes over, we're going to have a little backing piece of paper. I'm going to pull the backing off. I'm going to do that to each one of my diodes. And then I'm actually just going to stick them together. Kind of helps save on some room. And once we put our taillight back in, it can just tuck back into there, and we can put our bulbs back in the housing. The last wire we need to hook up is going to be the white wire. This is going to be our ground wire, so we need to find a nice secure spot that we can mount it to. Now we can go into the side of the frame or anywhere that has a nice solid piece of metal. We're going to be attaching ours back over here to this support so it's nice and out of the way. So we can estimate about how much wire we're going to need. We'll trim back the excess and strip the end of the wire. And grab the included ring terminal from our kit and crimp it in place. I'm going to take the included self-tapping screw now, and I'm actually going to pre-drill the hole and use the screw before I attach my ring terminal. So just come to the sheet metal on the body, and we'll drive the screw right into it. Now that we have the screw through, slide our ring terminal over. We'll just make sure that the screw is nice and secure into the sheet metal. You want to make sure that ring terminal doesn't move, but also that it doesn't strip out the screw. Now at this point, if you're going to be using your 4-pole, you just want to secure it on the front so it's not dangling there. However, you do have the option of replacing the plug with either a 4-round, 5, or a 6-way, and that's what we're going to be doing now. We're going to be putting a 6-way round onto the front. Now if you are keeping your 4-pole, again, you can leave it the way it is, just secure it up, and our kit is going to come with a jumper cord so we can connect our motorhome to our Canyon here, but we're not going to be using this since we're replacing it. So I'm going to go ahead and cut the 4-pole end off the front of my truck. And right now we got a decent amount of wire. We really don't need that much. So I like to bring it out to about here so I can still work with everything, but I'm just going to trim a couple inches of this wire off. You just want to make sure that you have 4 separate wires. We don't need that much going all the way back. Just a couple inches so we can work with each individual wire, and we need to strip each one of these. Now that we have our wire stripped, I'm going to pull the boot off the back of our connector. I'm going to make sure that all my wires pass through. And for now, I'm just going to kind of push it back out of the way so we don't have to worry about it. Now typically, if you look at the back of your connector, whether it's a 6 like we have here or any other, they are going to be labeled, so we want to make sure we connect the right connectors. On our 6-way here, if we start at the very top, it's going to be marked TM. That's your trailer marker light, and that's going to be the brown wire that's on our 4-pole. If we move over to the side, we'll have a GD for ground, which is our white wire. Then down at the bottom, we're going to have LT for left turn, which is our yellow wire. Next to that, we'll have RT for right turn, which is our green wire. And then we're going to have two more left over. Now, typically, the one next to our green wire over here on the side is going to be S. That's going to be for your electric brakes. And then the pin in the center is going to be your auxiliary 12-volt power source. So if you are using either of those two, you want to double check the cord and make sure you have this wired up correctly, because those two can be switched. But we'll just go through with a very small Phillips screwdriver, loosen up the set screws, put our wires in and tighten them up. And when you're loosening these screws, you don't want to take them all the way out because they're extremely easy to lose or drop. So you just want to loosen it up enough to where you can slide the wire in. Make sure you get all the strands of wire inside the terminal so we don't have to worry about it crossing over and arcing onto another one. Slide it into the terminal, and I like to leave just a little bit of copper sticking out of the top. That way I know I got all wire in there and there's no insulation that's going to cause any problems. And we just tighten up the set screw, make sure it's secure, and just start working our way around until we have all of our wires connected. And with all the wires connected, I'm going to slide the boot back on, make sure it covers everything up. Then I'm going to come back with a little bit of dielectric grease. I'm actually going to come from the back and backfill it. And hopefully that'll prevent any kind of rust, corrosion, or moisture from getting inside the connector and causing connection issues. We'll just fill the boot up. I'm going to grab some tape. I'm going to wrap the whole connector and boot in some electrical tape. That'll help hold it secure and also help protect any water or debris from getting inside. I like to put a little bit of tape going up the wire, so hopefully it can hide those bright colored wires on the front of our truck a little better. And finally we can mount our electrical plug to the front. Again, ours has a base plate, so we're just going to go straight into that. But you do want to make sure that it's nice and secure. Oh, you know, it's not moving around when we're driving down the road. Now, the final step in our installation is going to be testing our wiring to make sure the circuits are working properly. I have a tester hooked up to simulate my motorhome, and if I turn on the headlights, you can see the taillight function is working, as well as the left turn signal, my brake lights, and my right turn signal. All we have left to do now is hook up to our motorhome and hit the road. But that'll finish up your look at the Roadmaster Hy-Power Diode wiring kit on our 2019 GMC Canyon.